Welcome to another episode of Team Upside Talks. This season is all about exploring young people's journeys through education in Britain. Today, we are blessed enough to have Mohamed on the podcast. Mohamed has just finished his second year studying engineering at Cambridge University. He was born and raised in Pimlico, London, and he has been a key volunteer for Team Upside over the last 12 months. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into question number one. Mohamed, how would you describe the kind of secondary school you went to?
It was a non-selective state school, Pimlico Academy, literally just the school in the area. It was the type of school that accepted everyone. Like when you were applying to schools, if you wrote this in the bottom, just you knew that you were getting in. When it comes to size, there were like 210 people, I think, in my year. It got smaller in sixth form. The sixth form was 100, but in 7 to 11, 210 people. And I think, having watched some of the previous episodes, I think what was unique about my experience is that when I say the school was diverse, there's literally like no majority ethnic group, I don't think. So there was like Southeast Asians, there was like a lot of Albanians, a lot of Bengali people, a lot of even Sudanese people, like there was a lot of people like me. There was a decent number of white people too. It wasn't like they were a minority. There was all sorts of different people from different places.
All right, cool, man. Your school sounds amazing. It sounds like a very London school. It reflects London very well. In terms of your attitude as a student, how would you say your attitude towards education changed from year 7 to year 13?
I think my attitude, I don't think it changed because I was growing older or because I was maturing or anything. I think it was changing as my experience with education changed, if that kind of makes sense. As in year 6, me and one of my friends were always like being pushed to the extreme by our maths teacher. Like me and him were doing level 6 stuff, even though SATs was level 3 to 5 for maths. And he even went down to Pimlico before we started there and said, yo, these two are on it. What are you going to do to keep them up? And then came back apparently satisfied enough with them to say, yeah, just go there. But yeah, so that was year 6. And year 7, very similar. I was on it. As in, I messed about. And I didn't really care that much, but I still did well. I got like an award in year 7 for maths top student or something like that. But yeah, no, so I started off like with a solid foundation in education. But then I sort of got lax, I think. I didn't ever drop. I was always doing well enough to be satisfied. I was always in top set, for example. But I didn't do as good as I could until I started realizing like maybe I would be getting a bit overlooked. That's sort of when my competitiveness started coming back.
What were some of your proudest achievements during your time at school?
I think my proudest achievement was getting that A-star in physics in A-level. And that's purely because that was like, I didn't think I could get it. Like no one thought it.
Bro, like A-level sounded like a myth.
I tell you, when we were getting predicted grades for UCAS, I went to each teacher and like, I didn't think I was getting A-star, but I was like, yo, I beg you, just give me the A-star. And like chemistry, they were like, yeah, okay. Maths, okay. Applied maths, okay. Physics, the teacher looked me dead in the eye and said, last year, do you know how many A-stars I predicted? And they were all C's and D's.
What?
Yeah, he's like, so I refuse. He refused to give anyone an A-star, even if they banged them up. He's like, no, you're not getting an A-star predicted, just because like this guy was heartbroken. So that's sort of how it was for physics. Like I didn't know if I could do well, and then even in class I wasn't banging it that well, but then just putting in the work when it came to exam season and studying, and then like culminating in that grade, which is satisfying.
No, that must have been such a beautiful moment, 100%. But we're going to come to your A-levels because you smashed your A-levels. So we're going to come to that later. So you've mentioned some of the successes. So you talked about that award you got in year 7, and then you talked about the grade you got with physics A-level. At the same time, as well as experiencing success, all of us experience failure during our time at school,
100%.
during our time in education. So what I'd be really interested to know is, was there a time when you failed at school? And what did you learn from that experience?
Yeah, there were multiple times. I think a good one to start on is when I was in year 10. At the start of the year, we had like a mock in history and I got an A-star. And I was like, yeah, I'm doing good. And then, so we had 3 assessment points in the year. The second one was right before parents' evening and I got a G.
Sorry?
Like I got a G. I got literally 1 mark above the U.
Mad. In history, yeah?
In history, yeah. That's what you're doing now, yeah. Nah, but the teacher didn't even care. That was the worst part. It was like the teacher just was like, meh, which kind of meant like, I didn't expect much from you anyway. So then with that kind of like pushed me to work hard just to kind of prove him wrong. And like, I came back to an A at the end of the year, but that wasn't like even the A star where I started. And I think similarly in year 11, there was one of my assessment points right before parents evening where I banged most of my subjects, but in English I got a D. And I remember this clearly because I was with my sister. My sister came to parents evening for the first time, so did my mum. And I was like, yo, whatever you do not show this English teacher my report card like the other grades. So we sit down with the English teacher and he's like, don't worry, Mohamed's a smart guy. This is just a blip in the room. We'll get past it, etc., etc., etc. He wasn't stressed at all, yeah? Then he asked to see my grades. And when she showed him it, that's when he switched. And he was like, what's wrong with English? And I think the reason that's interesting to me is that in hindsight, it was like he didn't think I could do as well as I was doing until seeing evidence of it elsewhere.
Oh, mad, okay.
So I think
his expectations of you kind of increased because of the grades he saw on the paper.
Yeah, so I think there was a general theme of being underestimated. And I think what I learned from that is to always like push, like when it came to predicted grades later, when it came to a bunch of stuff, always just push it, despite like, even if I think I won't get it, even if the person thinks you won't get it, just like convince people. And yeah.
Where did your own kind of sense of belief come from? So if your teachers around you kind of underestimated your potential, what gave you the confidence to believe in yourself at the time?
That's a good question. I think my parents have always instilled in my whole family, me and my sisters, education. Like university was always going to happen. It was never an if, it was just which uni. So I think that sort of home environment was like, it's instilled in me that I had to, not necessarily had to do well. It wasn't like I wasn't pressured, but like I had to try. And yeah, like my dad would always say stuff like, if you don't try, you can't succeed. Yeah, I think it's that, and it's also that I found out later that I'm inherently a bit competitive. So like, if someone thinks I can't do something, I'll do it just to show that I can.
When was some of the first times you kind of clocked onto that?
Bro, even with basic things, like in uni, let's say I'm cycling to a lecture. If I'm, because obviously Girton's far, if I'm cycling by myself, I could be late to that lecture. But as soon as there's someone on the road next to me, I'm speeding because I just can't be like behind and overtaken by someone. I don't know why.
So you mentioned your parents, and you also mentioned your teacher in primary school as well. That really stood out to me. That teacher that went all the way to Pimlico High just to make sure that they would, give you the attention you deserved as a bright kid. My question for you now is, who were some of the mentors and teachers that really helped you along the way? And what made them so valuable to you as mentors?
I think there's a bunch of mentors. I think there's even a bunch that I just won't remember. Like when people say like it takes a village to raise a child, like I get that. But I think what stands out to me specifically is when I was trying to do my personal statement for university applications. Imagine I wrote out my first draft, and I go to the maths department and I bring it to them, and the door closes behind me and I hear laughing. That's how bad it was.
No way.
Like actual laughing. Yeah, so then from that, literally one of my teachers, she was assigned to me because she did engineering as a mentor from school, because she did civil engineering at UCL. I wanted to do aerospace engineering back then. So she literally got me a day of work shadowing with her boyfriend, who was a mechanical engineer, just to see what that's like. And then gave me like a magazine that I literally talked about on my personal statement. And then she worked with me on my personal statement in that she would check it with me. There was one day as well, me and my friend who I mentioned from year 6 earlier, this is both of us near the end of year 12, beginning of year 13 now. He was applying for maths and he had another maths teacher that did maths at St. Andrews. So there was one day in the maths office, it's just me and him and our 2 teachers. We're editing the personal statements, they're looking at it, we're talking about stuff, we're changing things, and then we'd swap teachers and do the same thing. And like, we did it for a lot of hours that night. That was the day that my personal statement was like complete.
Amazing. So what, did your teachers stay with you after school?
Yeah.
Okay.
So like,
they gave up their own time basically to help you out.
Yeah, the maths department like went above and beyond. I think also there's the teacher that just helped like believed in me. So like, my head of year, Mr. Wimborne in sixth form, he, funnily enough, at the end of year 12, we're meant to have a meeting with our head of year, and I was at a work experience or a summer school or something, so I just couldn't make it. So my dad went instead of me, and he told my dad, he's like, your son will go to Cambridge. My dad came home and told me that, and I was creasing because I just thought, this guy is waffling.
When was this?
End of year 12.
End of year 12, okay. So end of year 12, your teacher said that you're going to be going to Cambridge. You thought
Yeah.
he was waffling. Like, did you honestly not think that was within your grasp, or was it
As
too
in,
good to be true? Like, how did you think of it?
I applied to Cambridge with the expectation to be rejected. Basically, my sort of thinking behind it was, I have to predict the grids. Yeah, let me apply to the best of the best.
Hmm.
And if I get like 2 rejections and 3 offers, then I've aimed as high as I can, and that's like a good range. If I get all 5 offers and I didn't aim as high as I could,
Yeah.
then I probably could have got a better offer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. I think
Um,
that's like the kind of the traditional advice, right? To always aim for like 2 above, 2 that's relatively safe, and then 1 below, kind of.
That's the thing. I've never heard that. I've never heard anyone say that,
Mhm.
but it just made like logical sense to me. So that's what I sort of went for.
Definitely. So let's move on to like exams. So GCSE exams and A-level exams. What GCSEs did you take, and what A-levels did you take? And then how did you revise for GCSEs? How did you revise for A-levels? How did that revision strategy change over time?
With GCSEs, I think it's largely just recapping and past papers. You can do mind maps, you can do a bunch of stuff, but I don't think that really worked as much for me. With me, I literally just bang out past papers for GCSEs.
Mhm.
I would stay at the library till late because I realized I didn't work well at home, and then just bang out past papers. Oh, I didn't even talk about which GCSEs I did. GCSEs, I did triple science. We had computer science as an option for the first time. History, religious studies I chose. Yeah. But anyway, with A levels, chemistry was largely consolidating notes with me, and also the textbook questions, because they were very comprehensive.
Yep.
But then when it came with physics, there was a bunch of stuff that I found difficulty like ingraining in my memory, remembering fully. So then my teacher, I had 2 physics teachers. So I had the guy that I talked about earlier that refused to give the A star, but the other physics teacher, she told us near the end of, so throughout the 2 years, she would give us fat stacks of past papers, and because we were relatively new spec, she would include all the old spec questions that were relevant to you.
Okay.
And I probably still have them. There's like some fat stacks of loads of questions. They were like, they'd be this thick, and she'd never expect them back, but it's just for us to do. But then when it came to the end and the stuff that I was finding difficulty remembering, like not the mathematical calculations, but the bullet points about like nuclear power stations, etc., etc., she made us get an A4 piece of card, and we had to fold it into 6 pieces and then open it out again. That's 12 sections folded off. And then she told us to write everything on this cheat sheet that we would need to pass the exam. But the only caveat was you can't write something unless you know it, but you just don't really remember it.
Okay.
Like I can't write anything you just knew on there without knowing it.
Okay.
And then that cheat sheet, she called it like a Mokenya, is what she called it. But that became like, that was in my pocket nonstop. I'd be on the bus, I just whip it out and look at it. So then I literally started remembering the stuff as their position on the card. I think the point of it was, if I have this card with me,
Okay.
I
Yeah.
should bang 100% on the paper.
And so what? You were on the back of the bus,
But
opening it.
I'd have to go to like Edge Road to get meat or whatever. Like I just have it. I'd be reading like non-stop.
Bro, you know what you can do? If you still have that paper at home, send it to me and I'll screenshot it and I'll put it on the vid.
I can't lie, it was very cathartic ripping off at the end of.
No, that is good. Okay, cool. That's a really good technique, man. It's very similar to the active recall technique, where you just write down everything from the top of your head, and anything that you miss out, you kind of write in red pen. And it's just very easy to identify the gaps in your knowledge, because whatever in red is the stuff that you need to spend more time on. Before we move on to like university and choosing engineering, let's just break this down. Like, you ended up getting 4 A stars at A level, if you don't mind me saying, in probably the 4 most difficult A levels: maths, further maths, chemistry, physics. Like these are objectively some of the hardest A levels to do well in. So is there any kind of really like golden nugget pieces of advice that you have for each of those A levels? Yeah, just drop everything you can to really like help people secure those best grades.
With maths and further maths, it's pretty much just past papers, and the textbooks are like solid and just banging out past papers. And I know they changed the spec from our years, but I'm pretty sure most of our stuff is still relevant. Physics and Maths Tutor is a website that they even break down exams into topics instead of modules, which can be useful. With the sciences, I think it's also very past paper heavy, but I think there's different, you have to separate it. So I think especially with physics and a bit with chem, you have to separate what's calculations and understanding and what's pure rote memorization. I think this applies a bit to biology as well, even though I didn't do biology. But the stuff that's content that you just got to learn, there's no easy way to do it. You've got to spend time.
Yeah.
And then there's the stuff where you got to apply it elsewhere.
Mhm.
That's when you sort of have to learn to understand.
Perfect. I think you've kind of gone through the fundamentals essentially of like the main things that you need to do well in those subjects. So moving on to university, my next question for you, bro, is why did you choose to study engineering at Cambridge? And kind of talk us through the thought process of choosing a course and choosing a university to apply to.
I took a very convoluted route. So I really, really, really wanted to be a doctor.
Okay.
I was like fully set on medicine. This is up to year 11 even. I was on Imperial Pathways to Medicine program as well. I'd even like seen some like new research. They had a really cool knife that could identify whether it was cutting cancerous tissue or non-cancerous stuff. I had done like a lot into medicine, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I got to year 12 and I did one lesson of biology and I was like,
no way.
I'm not doing this for 2 years. Yeah. So then I started thinking, do I really want to do medicine? I didn't think I did. Then it was, what do I want to do? Then I wanted to do chemical engineering, but that's because I thought chemical engineering was just like crafting mad chemicals. I know you add this to this to this and it makes something.
So
like,
sort of Harry Potter wizard type thing, man.
Pretty much like some mad like post PhD like knowledge of all the chemical groups. But then I found out that's just pure chemistry, and chemical engineering is like running a processing plant or a factory, or like making small things happen on a bigger scale.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that doesn't sound fun. So then I realized I really like maths and I really like physics, but I didn't want to do a pure maths or science because I don't know, I felt like that I didn't want to go towards a research route.
Mm-hmm.
So then I started looking at engineering because it's has a lot more application. And I decided if I wanted to go into finance or anything in the end, engineering is still pretty solid to like keep all my doors open. It's again keeping as many doors open as possible.
Yeah.
But then now I'm going to specialize not in aero anymore, but in information and computer engineering and also mechanical engineering. But then why Cambridge? I think the best thing about Cambridge engineering is that the course is general for the first 2 years. So like I said, I've changed my discipline now, and that's only because I got to do all the disciplines for the first 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to do mechanical, thermofluids, electrical, civil, structural, materials, information, like a lot of stuff. But initially I wasn't even going to choose Cambridge. I really wanted to choose Imperial.
So what university did you apply to?
Okay, so my application, like the way I applied is dumb. I do not recommend anyone to do this, but I went on Complete University Guide and I clicked aerospace engineering and I applied to number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I will say the only reason that I did that was because I had done the Bristol and Southampton summer schools. Yeah. So I knew I would get a reduced offer from them. So I applied to Cambridge, Imperial, Bristol, Bath, and Southampton.
Okay, yeah.
And so like I wasn't just setting myself up with like high offers because I knew those two would be lower for me, Bristol, Southampton.
You mentioned some of these summer schools and you mentioned the Imperial pathway. It seems like you kind of participated in a lot of kind of course like programs that were designed to help people enter university. Do you want to drop the names of these programs that might be helpful for people?
Yeah, okay. So Into University did a lot of stuff. They did the Bristol Summer School. They did some work experiences, some internships. They're like proper sick of the charity. I didn't do the Social Mobility Foundation, but they plugged a lot of people with a lot of stuff. I did the Sutton Trust summer schools. Universities specifically do access opportunities if you just search them up. So that's how I did the Southampton. It was called Access to Southampton. And I did the Imperial Engineering Summer School as well. And then there's even companies that do stuff. So I did the work experience at EY in year 12. Yeah. In accounting.
100%. And Oxford did a unique program as well that I was lucky enough to be on as well. So that's, like you said, there's loads of opportunities for people to apply to when they're in sixth form, year 11. Cool. So before I ask the final question, I wanted to kind of ask you one more question about the application process to Cambridge. So kind of, do you want to break down the application process to engineering and just kind of give your tips on every single part of the journey?
Okay. I think from the beginning with the personal statement, find something specific that interests you, like something very specific in industry, and talk about it for a bit, maybe 1 or 2, 3 sentences. I think that's a good way to show that you're not just feigning interest. And you could even sign up to the Institute of Engineering Technology, Institute of Mechanical Engineering, or any specific engineering thing online as a student, and they'll send you magazines every now and then. So that's a shout as well, because like I literally just referenced one of the magazines in my personal statement. Then for Cambridge specifically, you have a second personal statement that's optional in the SAQ form that they have. So that's a good opportunity to talk about why the Cambridge specific engineering course is a better option, because like I said, it's completely different to the rest of the universities in that it's general for the first 2 years and you don't have a specialism coming in. So that's a good opportunity to talk about that. Then I do recommend looking at the college's pages specifically for engineering before you apply, so you can see the different teachers there, the different fellows and the different specialisms they have, and also the different processes, because some do in-interview tests, some do pre-interview tests. There's one college that asks for a step paper, which I honestly don't think I could have done. So like there's a lot of different requirements. Some even have different grade requirements, I think, different subject requirements.
For a step paper?
Christ. Okay. Christ asked for step paper. And I know Girton didn't require further maths, but I think some colleges did. Yep. So if you don't do further maths, there's still the option as well for you to do engineering.
Okay, cool.
But yeah, it's very college specific. Then you apply, had my interviews.
How did your interviews go?
I think to practice interviews for engineering, I want to study engineering.org, and it has a bunch of dashes, but if you search it in Google, it will come up.
Nice.
That has a lot of problem solving questions. It's very maths problem solving and less like physics. I had 2 interviews that day, and the first one was very basic physics, draw the forces around this car, etc., etc. But then the second one was a lot more maths problem solving and thinking outside the box with what you know. But I wouldn't stress about learning what you don't know for the interview, because in that form that you do at the beginning, you tell them what modules you would have studied by the time. So they know what you know and they know what you don't know. And they're trying to teach you in the interview to see how you react to that.
All right, amazing. Thank you for giving us the specifics. I'm sure a lot of the people watching will appreciate that. So moving on to our final question, Mohamed. This is the big question that we ask all of the guests at the end. What does education mean to you?
Yeah, this is the big one. I think my relationship with education has changed. I think if you asked me a few years ago or even a year ago, I would have said it's a means to an end. Like education is what gets you into the career, etc., etc. But now I think that's rubbish. I think education is how you grow. It's like if you don't want to be educated, you stifle yourself. And I don't think anyone actively doesn't want to be educated on anything. I think education comes down to literally just a part of being an adult. Like you carry on learning, you don't stop learning. But I don't think it ends. Even if it's not formal education, I know some people that have like learned and matured and improved so much outside formal education rather than when they were in school. And I think that's still valid. Like education is just growing and learning more.
Since we've got a bit more time, I wanted to ask you one more question. If there was one piece of advice that you could give your year 10 self, what would it be?
Doubt yourself. I think it's very easy to fall into a trap of why would I get this if someone else can also get it? It's very easy to compare yourself to a standard that doesn't even exist. And I think it's important to remember that you can do whatever you want to do. Like it sounds mad cliche, but literally just apply to stuff because it interests you. Like don't always look at the end goals, but don't think this will help me get a career. Do this because it interests you and because you want to learn about it. You don't want to be stuck in a career that you hate because you decided that's what you wanted when you were younger. But if you pursue things based on your interests, then it will lead to something that also interests you.
You can find out more about Team Upside by checking us out on social media at Team Upside or by visiting our website teamupside.co.uk. If you enjoy our episodes, please remember to leave us a review. Take care and see you soon.